Another game is completed, and this time it was Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. This was a truly fun experience. This is one of the better games that I've played this year. Obviously, Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is going to be my gaudy. I don't necessarily think that there's anything else that is going to directly compete with Clair Obscure, but I do think that we have other slots and other games that deserve recognition, and this is definitely one of them. Out of the 11 Ninja Gaiden games and the 6 main 2D ones, this is definitely one of my favorites. My favorite in general is probably 2, and I loved Ninja Gaiden 2 Black that recently came out, but this was also a really fun experience. I'm so glad that this year we're getting so many NG games, and this is one of the better ones. Do I think that it's the best? No. But I thought for it being such a short and sweet experience, it definitely deserves a lot of praise. So let's get started. Graphics, I thought that they were fantastic for what they were. Obviously, this is not supposed to be some 3D, hyper-realistic AAA game. It's a 2D game. I thought for the style that they went with, it looked really great. I thought that all of the colors were bright, but not so saturated that it felt like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I thought that all of the effects that were on screen were also really well done. Nothing with the graphics felt too overpowering, and nothing really felt out of place. That also counts when we are talking about the aesthetic. The aesthetic was extremely immersive. It felt like a Ninja Gaiden game through and through. I thought that all of the abilities looked fantastic. All of the bosses were unique and well designed. I really loved their outfits. The stages themselves also were really cool, and there were a few that felt very classic and nostalgic, right? Like Hell, the construction site. Some of those definitely felt like we've already experienced them before, but not in a negative way. They felt very nostalgic. The level design was really great as well, but the aesthetic was really nice. Very immersive, really cool. The music was also fantastic. I thought that all of the tracks sounded really good. There was never a time where I felt that it sounded dull. The music is very high energy, keeps you on your toes. It's very intense, and it's not the best soundtrack ever, but it did also fit really well, and it was cool. This is a soundtrack that I certainly will be listening to outside of playing the game. I will be playing this on repeat for a few weeks, I'm sure. This entire game felt familiar yet fresh, so I'm going fantastic. The difficulty was certainly up there. I played it on the standard difficulty that they offer you. Once you've completed the game, once you unlock hard mode, which is really cool. But this also gives you a lot of options where apparently if you go into the settings, you can tweak the difficulty. I didn't personally do that, but you can make it so you can take less damage and you can do more damage, I think. I just played it on the standard difficulty, which was definitely tough. All of the NG games are rather difficult. They're not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't say that they're the most difficult games ever, but this definitely packed a punch. I would say it was hard. It was not unfair, and I definitely understand the name Ragebound. I think that there's a couple of bosses in there that would make people rage quite spectacularly. The boss fights were also great. I thought that the final boss should have had another phase. Now, maybe that's just me being a Souls fan and thinking, well, it should always trick you into believing you've finally won the battle when you really haven't. I thought that they were all very different. There was no two bosses that felt too similar. It didn't feel like the developers got lazy and ended up repeating boss fights or even areas. And that's one great thing about a game being a lower price and being shorter, because the developers don't feel the need to throw a lot of filler into it, and this didn't have it. I really liked that. and the boss fights were all very cool. I loved their arenas. There were a couple that were extremely tough. We spent, at the longest, on one of the crystal bosses about 50 minutes, which hurt my heart and soul a little bit, but nowhere close to the 132 attempts it took me to defeat Melania for the first time, so I'm going great. The bugs were a little annoying. We only had one major bug. Actually, we had two. At the beginning of the game, in one of the tutorial areas, we glitched through a wall, and then we couldn't get back out to the other side. So that was a bug that was a little bit annoying. And then towards the end, when you're on the train, we ended up having a situation on our hands where we truly did turn into a ninja because we went invisible and we broke the game. We couldn't fight any of the mobs, and there were a lot of them. I thought that the game was going to crash. It didn't. So, hey, at least it's well optimized, but we did have a few bugs. I wouldn't say that they completely ruined the experience, seeing as we could just Leroy through the areas rather quickly and get back to where we were, because the areas are not extremely long. But yeah, to be honest, there were a few bugs. They didn't ruin the game for me, though. The story was all right. I don't necessarily think that we expected a very deep story here. If you play all of the NG games, then you definitely see where this can fit in. But Ryu goes to the land of the free and the home of the brave. He goes off to America to get a sword fixed. So we have to take his place and defeat all of these demons. We find Kumori, who is a very cool character. And I really liked how these two meshed together, because he was definitely the more direct type, and she was a little bit more fun, a little bit more playful. I wouldn't necessarily say flirty, but they had a fun connection. It felt almost brother and sisterly because they were constantly bickering with each other and kind of making fun with each other, but it kind of teetered on the line of being a little bit flirtatious. Not that we want a Song of Ice and Fire situation on our hands, but by the end, it felt sad when you had to make the decision of who lived and who died. I was a little bit heartbroken by the fact that we had to sacrifice Kumori, but they both felt like good characters by the end. I quite liked them both. They meshed very well together. I also really liked the dual gameplay system where one is melee and the other is ranged, and they work in combination with each other unless Kumori is going through the portal and she is platforming to try to unlock a door for him. I really liked that. It was really cool. The story in general was all right. I don't think anybody's going into this expecting some extremely deep lore and some gut-wrenching story that makes you question your existence by the end. This is no Claire Obscure 33, but it is still pretty good. It does not still touch Ninja Gaiden 2, which is, again, my favorite, but it was alright. The gameplay was very fun. I thought that for a 2D game, it was extremely well polished. It was well balanced. None of the bosses felt insane. You never felt insanely underpowered. The dual system where you have the melee and you have the ranged was really fun. The ultimate was a little bit broken, and I don't mean broken as in it didn't work. It was a little bit OP, but that was also really cool. I'm honestly going to go challenging yet amazing. I would say challenging yet fun is a little bit more accurate, but out of the NG games, this is definitely up there. Quality of life was perfect. I didn't think that it was missing any features. I didn't think that it gave you any extra features either that were so insanely cool. So I'm going to go perfect because I didn't have any qualms with it. The game time and length was rather short. This is not a game that is extremely long. It took us about 8.5 hours to complete. And that's also because we did get stuck on one or two bosses. But this is not a full price $70 experience. And keep in mind, there are certain studios that try to sell you a 10-hour experience for $80. which is crazy to think about. But there is also the ending B that you can get. We did not 100% this, so we didn't get all of these secret levels unlocked. We didn't get all of the scarabs and the skulls. If you wanted to do everything, you could probably get like 20 to 25 hours out of this, which is very cool. So because it is a short game, I think that if it was a higher price tag, that would severely hurt it. This is a $25 game, and I think that it is certainly worth that price tag. I think that the level of quality and the full experience that you're getting is definitely worth that price. So I would highly recommend getting it. If you are a fan of slightly tougher games, if you're a fan of ninjas and samurais and pretty ladies and badass looking men, if you're looking for a game to kick your butt a little bit, definitely worth the price. Replayability is decent. I think that you could get a handful of playthroughs out of this. I personally will be playing through it one more time, just so that I can get some of the scarabs and do the secret levels and get one of the other endings. But it's got a little bit of replayability. I wouldn't necessarily say that I would play this 5 or 10 or 20 times, but yeah, you definitely have the ability to go back through, plus you have hard mode unlocked, which is really good. This is one of the better games that I have played in 2025. I obviously think that Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is the best game to release this year with no competition, and it is one of my favorite games of all time now. And so I don't think that this game gets even close to that type of score, but when I'm comparing it in my mind to other games that I have played, such as the first Berserker Kazan or Wu Chang Fallen Feathers, it's comparable. It is short, it is sweet, it is very fun, and I would highly recommend this. I'm giving this an 8. I don't really have to think twice about my score. I feel very confident in the 8. Halfway through the game, I thought to myself, yeah, this is getting a pretty good score. And, well, again, it doesn't necessarily compare to the best games I've ever played. Fully, it doesn't reach those heights. It was a nostalgic, very fun, familiar yet fresh experience. I have only positive things to really say about this game. And for $25, you can't beat that. Just goes to show that the AAA developers in this industry that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on titles, they don't need to do that to make a good game. This title proves them wrong. Clair Obscure proves them wrong. Even games like Kazan prove them wrong. I don't think that this game had an insane budget. If I was to guess, I would say maybe $20 million. And that is pushing it. That is pushing it. Maybe I would say closer to 10, because there were quite a few names in the credits, and it had been in development for a couple of years. But yeah, really fun game. I love when titles exceed my expectations, give us a fun experience. It's a game and not a lecture, and I highly recommend it.